So I think it was about creating like a safety net. Like I said to them, I'm there to hold the space.
But that's what I was saying as well, because it's like at least you then sort of understand each other, even if it's just a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, this is what we're going for, and if I say this, then I mean that.
So I think the space you're in also just helps contribute to the emotions. Because I mean, not that I'm saying it was a good thing, but even the weather that day, it kind of also was just bringing down the tone of the actors. Hi, I'm Kaylin.
And I'm Mark.
And I'm Yaku.
And welcome back to another episode of Department Spotlight, where we talk to our friends and colleagues about their experiences in the film industry. And for today's episode, we are going to be talking about directing emotions, like really intense scenes with actors. So cool, let's get into it. So Mark, how, we worked recently on something that was had quite a heavy opener. How did you find tackling that scene, especially in such a busy location that we were at, and the weather as well? How was it for you?
So we recently worked on a film and I directed, and it was incredibly emotional. I can't get into specifics, but there were characters in very desperate parts of their lives. And I think because that's exactly what he said, because of I knew that the locations were also going to be very intense. So it was just about doing all of that work beforehand. We had a lot of rehearsals, and it was just about establishing a sense of safety and security between all of us. I said to them from the get-go, I'm not going to be one of those people or one of those directors, which I think is incredibly unethical, and we can get into that as well. I think you hear, and I'm going on all of these tangents, but it'll explain my point. Basically, I said to them, with Stanley Kubrick and Shelley Duvall, I'm not saying I'm Stanley Kubrick, but what I mean is that there's that infamous story that he basically tormented her for months on end to try and get that performance out of her, which I think is nonsense. It's so unethical to be a horrible person when, if you've seen films that they've gotten great performances out of them another way, like we were speaking about in the other episode about auteur theory, then there's no reason you have to be awful. So I think it was about creating a safety net. I said to them, I'm there to hold the space. And then that's sort of a thing that we started to get into on set, was all of the things that we said in rehearsal about what happens in the scene, who the characters are, where they're coming from. We built all of that into what we called the space, and then before we did the takes, we just said, okay, I'm gonna give you a few moments to get into the space, and then that meant thinking about everything that we said in the rehearsals, which got them into that place before we started. So it was about, because it was going to be hectic, and because the locations are going to be hectic, it was about loading up as much into a sort of shorthand before, and then they know that I'm there to be okay, cut, or let's just give them a few moments and something. So it was about being empathetic, is the sort of very shorthand version of a very long-winded answer.
No, but I think that's super interesting. But in terms of like you're saying, building up the space and all that, was there any kind of directors or books or theories that you read up that led you to come up with that idea of the space, or was that something prior established that you read about, or was that something that you just kind of developed with the actors?
Well, I think there's always that, there's that thing of just getting stepping in and stepping out, and we spoke about decompression as well afterwards, immediately after a take, or even after a day. I think it's really important to step out of that space as well. So in terms of where it came from, I think it's I think we just use that shorthand in terms of what's referred to as just getting into character, or just getting in, there's lots of different terminology for it. It just became the certain words that we used in rehearsal became, and explanations and long discussions into it just became shorthand for. So it's like, referred to as a lot of different things, just like getting into character, basically.
And did you also feel that, because I know when we did that, did it on the last day, do you also think it's best to rather get those emotional scenes done like more towards the end of our shoots, like of filming, or do you think it's nice to get it out the way in the beginning, or what's your take on that?
Well, I think that a lot of a director's job is that obviously you won't get the luxury of being able to shoot in sequence. So I think a lot of your job is to think about where the characters were before the scene that you're shooting now and where they're going to, so that when you put it all together, it follows. It's not just like all over the place. So when we shot the second scene first, when they were walking into the scene, there was a lot of starting from where that previous scene ended, you know what I mean? Which is like a tricky thing because that's not like how we experience life.
Exactly.
That's why rehearsals are so important. Like, I don't know how it would be possible to create this if you're only meeting the person on the day or whatever. I know obviously it's not always possible to do rehearsals, which actually is something that I didn't know was a thing. I mean, obviously from film school it was like, had the luxury of like, oh no, they're students, they're free, let's go do some rehearsals. But then when we were doing Malamjala, we got actors that weren't necessarily studying and not studying at after. And it's like, okay, now we have to fit into everybody's schedules. They're not like budgets, whatever. So I don't know how people do film any kind of movie without rehearsals, honestly.
I think it's funny you say that because that's for me also, like when I was in third year and all that, I always loved doing rehearsals and stuff like that, breakdown. But then for one of my films, one of the actors says no, they refuse to have rehearsal. They like to have them, like the emotions raw on the day for certain scenes. And like I used to get kind of angry because I'd be like, no, but I want to know what's happening so that we can do it. But then like on the day, like because she's quite a respected actor now, and like it actually worked a little bit. But I think it was just for the process for some scenes where she was like, no, she wants to like take some of the actors off guard or something like that. But I think it can be quite a volatile situation though, if because then it makes it tricky also for when you like want to go redo that take, and then they have to try and remember all of those like those characters reacting and stuff. So like I have seen it work a couple of times, but for me personally, I still kind of feel more comfortable with rehearsals just because if you can, I think it helps you so much more, and it helps all the other actors, and especially when it comes to editing and stuff, when you just go into something on the day and no one really knows, it's hard to like kind of reenact that moment for the second take and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously actors have, it's not like you need, as the director, you need to make sure that the actors are doing it right. I think rehearsals are sort of more there for you to get to know the other person, establish the director-actor relationship, because what works for one person doesn't work for another person. And if you're only meeting the person on the same day, you don't really know what's going to work. So you could be like giving the direction a certain way and they just don't work that way. And then you have to on the day figure out that, oh no, I have to do this differently, which takes time, and but I don't know how people do it.
No, but like I think like you said, it takes time, because for me as well, like when you're directing it on the day, and then you like when you're directing on the day, because what rehearsals do is it helps you to see if a scene even works that you've written, like if you wrote it as well. Like that's also what I think rehearsals like help a lot with me, just to see the whole vibe of that scene, and so you can go into rewrites as well beforehand. So I think it's key. But just going off on a bit of tangent. But for you, Jaco, how do you come when it comes to like directing emotions? What is your process usually with actors and those kind of scenes?
I mean, I feel like I haven't really directed that many.
I think in Malamjala there was
Malamjala.
nice
Malamjala was probably the most emotional thing that I've just done comedies.
And Redacted also had some
Redacted. Yeah, true. Okay. I like the idea that Mark had about declaring a space, or like, and then it's like a shorthand, like you say, and you don't have to explain it every time. For me, I like to go on references a lot, especially when I can't, like back then that was like one of the first things that I directed, so I didn't really know all the like language, all the like techniques. What I did is I think Mark actually just like before it randomly showed me or told me about The Leftovers, and I was like yeah. And then when we were writing as well, we were like yeah, this is that time, and then showed it to the actor, and then we worked through it in rehearsals. We had like 3 weeks of rehearsals, but like I would only have like 1 day with each person per week. With that actor, we were talking like, okay, so this is what I'm going for. What do you need? What do you feel when you watch this? Stuff like that. And then on the actual day, it was sort of just more of a beforehand, just making sure everybody's quiet, because by then she already knew how to do it. She already like she's just an actor. She knows how to do it. And then she just, I don't know, did it, and we did it a couple of times. And it's always just about, yeah, for me it's always the rehearsals. I don't know what else. It's like you speak to the person, you ask them to trust you, and then if they do trust you, then you're good.
So speaking about what you were saying earlier and meeting an actor on the day, I also don't know how that's that's done. And I think a lot of where the confusion might come in is that a rehearsal allows you to get on the same page, to have the same idea about who the character is. Because I think a lot of the confusion might come when you don't rehearse is if you give a direction and then it might be a good direction coming from your understanding of the character. But if they have a different understanding of the character, that's not a good direction.
Exactly.
So you need to both understand like who this character is, like, and even when we did a lot of these rehearsals and a lot of these and we had a lot of conversations about who these characters are and where they came from, when we were on set and we brought all of the different sort of costume options to decide on, I still had a different idea about what this clothing this one character would wear versus what the actor thought that they'd wear. I think that is so important to just even go on like tangents about the character in rehearsal, not just speak about what happens in the scene, but speak about other things that may not necessarily be written down, but become like small, like sort of textual things that like load up a character beyond just like what's written.
Nah, like I said, I completely agree with that, because like for me personally, when that actor was telling me that, and we like even try to do like a sit down read through at least or something like that, like I said, like you said, the rehearsals just help feed into it so much and just establish the relationship and like the both of you understanding with the character as well. So yeah, like I kind of just also agree with that, because as much as like it worked in the scene and stuff like that, I think it's just maybe that particular actor just has like really knows what they're doing and stuff, and you won't get that all the time.
But also, like you said, you at least had the sit down, right? So maybe if it's not like a straight up rehearsal where you like, explore everything, you're at least like talking to the person.
Yeah, no, I think on the day, I don't like that. I've never had like that. I don't think I've ever had the case of that, but I have had like meetings, but I never had like a proper with this one particular thing. I never had like proper rehearsals with all the actors in the space and stuff.
But that's what I was saying as well, because it's like at least you then sort of understand each other, even if it's just a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, this is what we're going for, and if I say this, then I mean that. Or
Yeah.
I think if I was in that situation where I wasn't able to have a rehearsal with someone or meet the person or something, and it's like on the day, I think as soon as I got there, I'd go straight to that person and start just like having a conversation, not even necessarily about that, but
And Sonia, you're also talking about like auteur directing and stuff like that. I was watching, I think it was Heartfelt when Matt Damon was actually talking about Saving Private Ryan, where Spielberg had everyone else like do the training and all of that other stuff separately, all the hardcore stuff, and exclude Matt Damon so that they wouldn't like him at all on set because he didn't have to go through that. And he said that's exactly what happened. Like everyone just had this feeling towards him, and that's what they wanted for the film. So I think there it was like, but like, I still don't know if I completely agree with that kind of thing where you isolate it. But maybe I don't know if like you're talking about Spielberg or something like that. Sometimes it works, but I don't think you should take it to the extreme though. Like that, like I think it's still fine. Like maybe like keeping them away from certain training, but not like you said, like tormenting someone for months and months. That I don't know.
I mean, that's just like an approach. I mean, I'm sure they weren't like awful to him. It's just like that feeling of like
outsider kind of.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you do have to be wary about like where is that line between being this like weird kind of, because you're like the director, you're like that the constructing of all these like strange dynamics and stuff, and you can like bend and twist and stuff, and you have to be aware that like how you're doing that. Is it like, is this hurting anyone else? If so, don't do that.
Exactly. Like if you look at the extreme version, like if you look at Parks and Rec, that one scene where Andy didn't let anyone know that he was going to be fully naked. And then they got the reaction, but like after that, like the actors and all that said like, yo man, that's not okay.
Far,
That's like director would never say do something like that. You know? So well maybe the ones that like really risque, but just for me in terms of directing emotions, personally from my experience, like I always found that research helps a lot. Like you said, like showing them the references. Like when I had like something that dealt with like really hectic issues, like sexual harassment and stuff like that, I would like sit down and be like, I'll be like, is it okay for us to watch like these documentaries about it and see these ladies' reactions to it? And when it came to like drug usage and like someone that comes from like using a lot of drugs in the scene or like a particular kind of drug, like I would show them documentaries on that and seeing the people's mannerisms and reactions and how their families react to it and stuff. So it kind of gives them like their own not backstory, but something they can feed upon. With, like I think references really help with that, especially when you're watching something heavy and hardcore. But obviously, with the actors can say like, is this okay to put into your process? And then that after watching that, we then get into the rehearsals, and then that's when I also say like, just remember that space for those ladies we watched, or that guy we watched on the street, or this and this. And I felt like even like for Isolwani, that where we were dealing with homeless. With the theme of homelessness and living on the streets, like we went to go shoot a documentary and find out from these people what are the emotions that even fit into the title Isolwani, because they said they feel like animals and stuff like that. So having the actors with that and for that documentary, I think that really helps. It's just the research that helps building into something that's heavy that maybe they may not have experienced. And I don't take anything away from the acting experience. I just want to help aid in like tools that they can help them for.
But that's also like you giving them references, because you don't necessarily. I mean, I don't you things that you necessarily haven't gone through.
Exactly.
You're showing them this is how I'm seeing it. If it's a documentary, great, you can see it the same way that I'm seeing it, and then we can talk about how you're understanding it and how I'm understanding it. Because seeing and understanding obviously different. But yeah, that I mean. Just a whole bunch of conversations.
Honestly. But then also, like, I think then on the day, which I think Mark did brilliantly as well when we were directing the scene, is like, on the day, you need to make sure you have minimal crew. You need to make sure that you set the tone, like, not just showing the actors the research, but showing the whole crew so that they understand the seriousness of the tone of what you're trying to convey. So, like that movie we did together, that Stitch and Fantasy, that was so intense. Like we also like I try to make sure that on the day that you can't like really make too many jokes or try and because the crew can't be laughing around the actors and stuff like that. And it can be hard sometimes, even as a director, sometimes you forget and the actor will remind you. But I think it's important just on the day as well to just maintain that space. And I know it was difficult for the shoots we were on because we were on the bridge of Arties, and like it's almost like people were paid to like try and break the characters with hooting and music and all of that. And so I think the space you're in also just helps contribute to the emotions. Because I mean, not that I'm saying it was a good thing, but even the weather that day, it kind of also was just bringing down the tone of the actors. But I think for that scene it worked. But I'm not saying that's something that someone should do. But I'm just saying the space has a lot to do with the emotions that you're in as well. So as a director, I think the management of that space is also the good thing along with rehearsals as well.
Should we talk about like writing those scenes as well? Because a lot of it, well, for us at least, we don't really receive a lot of scripts. Oh, you did. You received the script for One Last Thing.
Oh, yeah.
You don't write it. So maybe let's talk about that first, and then we can talk about writing it ourselves. So what's it like receiving a script from someone else to direct, and then it's like this subject matter...
It's so stressful because it's like I wouldn't approach the writing of it that way. But the thing with this specific one, and I suppose is a good example, is that every single like script will be different. Is a good thing to also think about. This was written by both of the actors, so they both had like a hand in it. So there was already kind of like two perspectives like playing off one another, creating some like interesting conflict. I think it's just about, if it's like not your writing, you're still directing it, so you need to facilitate how to best tell like this story the best way you can. I think that's the only way. If it's like not your material, you still have to think like, okay, I can only do this the way I know how to do this, because otherwise I'm gonna be like, I don't know, directing through like another perspective or something. So initially I was like terrified, but then I was like, I think I said to you that I was terrified, and you're like, no, just do what you always do. And then I was like, oh, so yeah, I should just like trust my gut and just do it the way. And that doesn't mean like you're gonna like take it and twist it and change it to. It's just like
Trusting yourself.
trusting your kind of. It's almost like you're like the funnel, and you have to be the funnel for the script that goes through. And yeah, just about bringing like yourself to it, not to change it, but to tell it in the way that you
Yeah.
can.
But I think it's good what happened with you, because I know like you even like message me and you're like, dude, I'm going crazy, I'm stressing so much. But I think like that part of it at least shows that you respect the story, and I think that's like a fundamental thing. As long as you show that you respect the writer's approach, and then afterwards you come in, like you said, you're going to be the funnel. I think that's important, because if you get given a script that you have no connection to, I think it's important to first do the research into it and like just have that kind of conversation. And like I think the fear is good, because it means you want to know more about it, so that when you do get to that point where you want to be the funnel, you can just jump straight into it. I don't think from the beginning you should just have this idea like, okay, I'm gonna make this my way. I think like how it was for you, like first thing understanding where everything is coming from, and then trusting yourself. Because I think if you do it a bit too early on, it might be like, come on, it's a bit too separated from the story, if that kind of makes sense. I kind of like agree with how it is. Like I think you're kind of meant to have that fear in the beginning, so that you just know that you have the right level of respect for it. Because I know for me, like I also had to in college as well direct something that wasn't mine, and it dealt with mental illness and things like that. So for me, I had to ask like the writer, where does this come from? Where was this going? And like, because it's scary when you're directing something that's not yours. But I think just like making sure you understand where the writer's coming from, or at least understanding the research and the big talking points around that today. I think that's just an important thing, especially with writing.
One, I think, last thing about you just mentioned the connection to the material, and I think that what sort of put me at ease a little bit was that the subject matter of the material wasn't like foreign to me, so I didn't have that terror of like, I don't know what this world is at all, or like what type of movie this is at all, because me and the writer had a lot of conversations before about like what kind of movie it is, and we both like those kinds of movies, so there wasn't that kind of fear. And I suppose that's another point, is that if something is like completely foreign to you in terms of your connection to it, you maybe have to ask, can I do like a lot of research, or can I immerse myself into this world so that I find that connection? Because you can find that connection in sort of any kind of material, but then I suppose if it's too foreign to you, you kind of have to ask, am I the one to direct this?
I think for me, when it came to that situation, like the writer had no option of none, because she wasn't allowed to direct or anything like that. So she was like really desperate, and I had to like, because like no one.
I remember this
Yeah.
movie. What was it called? Super something. What was it called?
Which one?
The
Short films and dopamine.
One with short films and
Short film and dopamine.
yeah.
And the writer had such a brilliant concept, and like it was a bit of a foreign thing for me, but I had to like just step in and be like, I'm gonna try my best to like aid in this, because otherwise she would have no other option.
Yeah.
And I think it just gives like a good segue for when you're like later on in life and you have to direct certain materials, like if hopefully like you're working for like studios that want to send you scripts and stuff like that. I think it just helped me prepare to like see how can you try and put yourself, and how can you kind of align yourself when you have no other kind of choice, you know what I mean?
It's such a good movie as well. Like I remember because it was totally different to what you'd done before. Like, and then it's because all your stuff is always like dark
Heavy.
and heavy. And then this was like a comedy.
It's my favorite film from
It was like an homage to movies, basically.
No, because I think the thing was Andy is such a brilliant writer and stuff, and so the benefit I at least had as well was that she was with on set. So I just like every time like for the characters, like I would just refer back to Andy and be like, can you help discuss the scene with the actors? That we just go through all of this, because then at least the writer just kind of gives you that thing to feed, and we both kind of work on the same page. So I was more directing practically, and she would be more with the characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it was a really cool experiment. So I feel like it wasn't completely me by myself, but I think it really helped me also just to, like, I think directing something that is completely out of your ball game just also like helps shake things up a bit, and just shows you how like how versatile it can be, and challenges you, and shows you what you're good at and what you're bad at as well. So yeah, it was a cool experiment. And so yeah, but I mean, just like segueing into that, like when it comes to writing those like emotional scenes, what's your like process, Yaku, when it comes to like writing big emotional scenes, or something like that? What's your process into getting into characters and the mindsets?
I mean, we write together mostly. I don't know. I feel like the only times that I've written emotional stuff alone was recently. I sent you that script. I haven't sent it to you yet. And it's just sort of like things that I'm feeling at the moment. It's not really like the only other one that I'm going to talk about is Malamula, I think. But we can talk about that together. But the other two that I'm thinking of now, maybe there's another one that I just can't remember. But the other two that I'm thinking of now is just sort of like I just wrote ideas and then I sort of structured it into a story afterwards. Those are like the only things that I've written alone ever. I don't know. I feel like I can't do it if it's not something that I've thought about or experienced, or yeah, I like obviously things that are like you should write what you know. I feel like, and if you haven't gone through similar things, it's not possible. Well, for me at least. I think when we wrote Malamula together, there was like pieces of like there was the monologue thing that we were talking about from the leftovers. Yeah. I was like, what are you doing?
Who's standing behind you guys?
Yeah, and so there was like little pieces. Obviously, I think this was the first thing you wrote since that third year of after. And then I was also like new to things and thinking about, well, I was new to writing, and I was thinking about how things work, and then watching the leftovers, sort of like, yeah, that's what I want to tap into. What do I want to say while I'm tapping into it, I guess. That's the only way I can describe it.
And for you, Mark, I know you've co-written a lot with Yaka as well.
Yeah, I think there's a moment that we know that we're onto something good when we have like a bruh moment.
Bruh.
Bruh. You basically start out with like a lot of stuff. Like you have like the main concept that might come from anywhere, and then you start throwing out like a lot of ideas, and then it starts getting like more and more concrete. It's almost like the same thing about like when you have a conversation with someone, and then when there's like that moment of alignment when you find out what you're actually speaking about the whole time. And then there's that moment where it's like, bruh. So I think you gotta like dig and dig until you find that moment. And then once you found that thing, you've often found like what the actual story is about. And then it's just about, the rest of it is just about like chasing that thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. So creating the bruh moment.
Creating the bruh moment. We just DM'd that.
Sorry, let's just clarify. BRUH.
Yeah.
Bruh.
Yeah, so I think for me in third year is where I really started learning how to write emotions properly, and I think Zunaid helped with that a lot. Our lecturer Zunaid, he used to say something like, if you don't feel like an ambulance needs to pick you up by the end of your 15th draft or whatever, then you didn't write a good enough script. Which I think is kind of extreme, but it kind of got me on the right path, because like I used to wonder what he was talking about, but then like when I sat down, I just took my ego out of it, and I used to play like random like I just typed in music and just listen to like and then it would like be like weird stuff that would slowly lead me into a tunnel, like, okay, this kind of song is actually getting me there, let me try and find similar songs. And then I found that music really helped me a lot with writing a scene, because it just kind of took me out of the space, and like if it's like really instrumental or something like that, it just really helped me get into the character, and it would cause me to like sometimes just really like cry on the keyboard and write really intense scenes, and just really helped me, because it like made me imagine the scene, like when you have like music in the scene, it kind of just makes you imagine the scene playing out, And like the opening for my feature script that I wrote, like I played this really intense like tribal music, and it just gave me the scene of someone running in the woods. The music like was really intense, and the drum beating and all of that was just like really like high pace and kind of psychedelic as well at the same time. So it just got me in this space of like I just felt like someone was chasing me in like the wilderness, and like I had this frantic emotion, and it just led me into that scene where like the opening for the feature script has something similar going on, and then that kind of
So good.
and and I usually only find that happens when like for emotional scenes, not really for dialogue because I can't really listen to music for those scenes, but when it comes to like really intense character realizations or moments or like scenes like that, I find that music really helps me get into the space of writing in that. If I find some music that's similar to that tone, it gives me this like something to play out in my head, like that kind of scene that I can write in. So that really helps me a lot, and I found that that's been my kind of go-to thing now. And like, I do also feel that you need to really like when you get to that space, you'll know it because you'll feel like something different. You won't feel like it's you writing. You'll just feel like you know there's something going on mentally with how you're writing it. So yeah, that for me, like I said, my main thing is just finding music that suits the scene, or sometimes even music that's completely opposite to what you're writing. Because sometimes I found if it's not like an emotional scene or something, it can also give you an interesting scene or like a new way to write it and an interesting take to write it. So yeah, I found that music's my main thing for when you're writing something emotional, and also just taking my ego out of it and just trying to be as humble as possible so that the characters can sometimes just like kind of like I can just kind of speak to those characters while trying to put my own approach onto how I would be in the situation. So yeah, that's been the way I do it. But you know, I think we can wrap up on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah,
I think yeah, but hopefully we gave some good notes today. I think it was an interesting discussion.
So that's it for this episode of Department Spotlight. We hope you learned something and took away something from our discussion. If you did, then let us know about it in the comments below. And just above that comment box, there's two very important things. There's a like and a subscribe. So if you could do both those things, that'd be swell. So
we would really like it if you liked.
We would really subscribe it if you subscribe it.
But until next time, go out there, stay safe, and make your movie.